There's more than 500 cases of rape and execution have been reported in Ethiopia's Tigray region, according to the United Nations. The UN says soldiers are killing civilians, gang raping and torturing women, and losing households and crops. Hundreds of thousands of traumatized people have been forced to leave their homes in the mountainous region of about 5 million. Let's talk more about this then with Letitia Bader. She's with Human Rights Watch with the Horn of Africa office. A very good evening to you, Letitia. Thank you so much for your time. I know you don't speak specifically to the allegations of women being raped in the fighting in Tigray, but were you surprised at all, I beg your pardon, to hear just some of the reporting by the United Nations about just what's been going on allegedly?
No, absolutely not. I mean, in terms of the trends around sexual violence, of course, the numbers which have come out so far are only reported cases of rape and are most likely a significant underestimation. And why it is likely that it's an underestimation is one of the grave crimes we've been seeing and documenting ourselves in the course of the 4.5 months of fighting in Tigray has been what the medical NGO Doctors Without Borders has described as a deliberate attack on healthcare. So a lot of people just don't have access to healthcare right now as we speak. And a lot of people are also in parts of the country where there continues to be unrest and people are too scared to move. So it's very likely that a lot of survivors of rape and of other conflict-related abuses are not getting access to healthcare right now.
Another development out of Ethiopia this week was the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announcing that Eritrean forces who were in the fighting around Tigray would now be leaving the region. There's no specified date for their withdrawal. Will that help to bring about stability and reduce the fighting?
We've documented very serious abuses by the Eritrean forces, not just along the border with Eritrea, but well inside the Tigray region, notably 10 days of horror in the historic town of Aksum in central Tigray, where we basically documented both unlawful shelling by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces when they initially took the town of Aksum, but then widespread pillaging by the Eritrean forces, and then 24 hours of going door to door and indiscriminate killings of hundreds of, especially men and boys, some children as young as 13 in the town of Aksum. We've also documented serious abuses by the Eritrean forces in and around the Eritrean refugee camps. So these are Eritrean refugees who fled serious abuses back home in Eritrea, who have found themselves caught between a rock and a hard place between Eritrean forces and Tigrayan militia, also in the Tigray region. So, you know, we are talking both about serious abuses, ongoing reports of serious abuses, but also obviously a context in which so far we've seen complete impunity. And so what we have been calling for are both serious international investigations to preserve evidence, which is absolutely key to pave the way for future accountability. And that's going to have to be accountability by all sides.
And Prime Minister Abiy says that those responsible for the atrocities will be held to account. What credibility does any investigation by the Ethiopia government have, given that at the beginning of this violence there was an internet and communication shut down? Groups such as yours and the media were not allowed to go in and document what was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been a concerted effort throughout this conflict to basically prevent reporting from happening. There's been a bit of a shift in the last month or so, both with telephone networks more or less restored, with some international media, which have also been chosen, which have been allowed into the region. But we're no way talking at this point of the space to thoroughly report on what's going on, but also to make sure that people can speak to investigators, can speak to journalists without reprisals. And we are very concerned about what we have seen in terms of reprisals so far against communities who have spoken to journalists. I mean, I think more broadly in terms of the commitments, I mean, one of the concerns we have had is that we've been documenting cycles of violence in Ethiopia and also security force abuses for over 2 years now. And each time we called on the Ethiopian government to credibly investigate these bouts of violence, and we haven't seen that materialize. And obviously right now we are talking about a conflict and a range of abuses of a certain complexity complexity and magnitude which require international investigations.
Let me ask you this, Letitia. 5 months ago, when the violence in Tigray took off in late 2020, there was a lot of global media coverage, a lot of conversations were going on about it. When you watch developments this week from the pronouncements made by the United Nations about the alleged atrocities committed against civilians, as well as the announcement by the Prime Minister that Eritrean forces are going to withdraw sometime, hopefully soon, it has been very muted as far as reaction and coverage. What is the risk of Tigray and the atrocities committed there becoming one of the forgotten horrors of the world?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, as you know as well, there are, in theory, elections which are planned for June in Ethiopia, and the concern is that any attention on Ethiopia will actually be diverted also towards the electoral process in the country. International African Union pressure, attention needs to continue. Now is more key than ever before, where we are not only starting to just realize the magnitude of what has been happening, but facing an absolute humanitarian crisis. And it is absolutely the responsibility of the international media, however hard it is to report on what's going on in the region, to continue to shine a spotlight on the horrors which have been happening and continue to happen there.
Letitia Bader with Human Rights Watch, good to speak to you. Thank you.